When I lost my job, my husband, whom I had provided for 2 years, scornfully mocked me, calling me worthless and repeating that he always knew I was a failure. He had no idea that I had sold a patent for $12 million. When he started saying he wanted a divorce so he could find someone better, I readily agreed. And within a few months, his cocky smile disappeared in an instant. I was sitting in my home office, squeezed into a corner of our spacious apartment, when I heard Ethan's voice from the living room. He was on the phone, thinking I couldn't hear. But in our 32nd floor apartment, with its trendy open spaces, the sound carried too well. Yeah, can you believe it, Mark? Laurel's out of Evertech. I always said she was a loser. Too soft, insignificant for the real business. I gripped the letter tighter in my hands. The heavy, expensive embossed paper felt like it was burning my fingers. Securus Future is pleased to confirm the purchase of your patented quantum data encryption system for $12 million. $12 million. An amount I still couldn't fathom. Of course, I told her you can't stay at the same company for 5 years. Ethan continued, in that condescending tone he'd gotten around the same time he'd stopped working. But she's stubborn. Now she's paying the price. At least she has a husband with prospects. I chuckled bitterly. Ethan's prospects over the past 2 years had consisted of endless conversations about startups he'd never started, business plans left in his phone notes, and networking that consisted of dinners with similarly unemployed friends at my expense. Our apartment with panoramic windows and designer furniture that I didn't choose, but for which I paid the mortgage faithfully. Ethan's car, which he called a necessary image investment. His watch collection, because a successful man has to look successful. All paid for by my paycheck, while I spent nights working on my encryption system. Come on, Mark, Ethan laughed. I know what I'm talking about. I've been living with her for 6 years. She's afraid to take risks, afraid to stick her neck out. People like that will always be mediocre. Every word he said was like a needle piercing the remnants of my self-esteem. When did it start? After we got married 4 years ago? Or when he lost his job and decided that the corporate world wasn't for creative types like him? Gradually, day by day, his comments became more and more venomous. Honey, that outfit makes you look fat. You can't get promoted with your skills. If only you were more confident like me. I remembered the day I told him about my encryption idea. We were sitting down to dinner, which I had prepared after a 12-hour workday. It's a revolutionary system, I said, truly excited for the first time in a long time. It uses quantum principles to create keys that are impossible to crack, even theoretically. Ethan sipped the wine I'd bought to celebrate my breakthrough. Honey, he smiled indulgently. If it were that easy, someone would have done it a long time ago. Especially someone with... He waved his hand, searching for a word. Ordinary powers. From that day on, I didn't tell him about my work. Every night after he went to sleep, I sat down at my computer and worked on my system. Every weekend, while he went out with friends to network, I programmed. And 2 months ago, I patented my system. And a week ago, I lost my job due to massive layoffs. And since then, Ethan has never missed a chance to remind me how worthless I am. The sound of the key in the lock brought me back to reality. I quickly tucked the letter into my desk drawer and wiped my cheeks. I went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The mirror reflected a woman with red eyes that I barely recognized. Ethan walked in looking like a winner, tossed his keys on the table by the door, where I always left the decorative vase he'd broken a week ago, and didn't even apologize. Laurel! He called out without seeing me. Are you home? Yes. I came out of the bathroom with a fake smile. How was the meeting? Awesome. He didn't even look at me as he pulled off his expensive shoes. I met Ryan Gilmore. You don't know him. He's a big shot in venture capital. He's interested in my freelance platform idea. He says it's potentially unicorns. The same idea I pitched to him a year and a half ago. Sounds great, I replied mechanically. I'm starving. Ethan went into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. You didn't cook anything? Really? You have a lot of free time now. I was busy looking for a job, I lied. In fact, I'd spent the day consulting with a financial advisor about how best to invest my future millions. I've always said you need to develop connections. Ethan rolled his eyes as he pulled a container of last night's leftovers out of the refrigerator. I'd have found 3 offers by now if I were you. Order something, huh? I'm gonna take a shower. Oh, and iron that blue dress. We're going to Josh's birthday party tomorrow. He disappeared into the bathroom without even noticing the look on my face, and I stood in the middle of our expensive apartment, which I hated, and realized I couldn't live like this anymore. I don't want to live like this. I had reached the point of no return, and maybe for the first time in a long time, that was good news. 5 years ago, my life changed at the Tech Forward Technology Conference in San Francisco. I went there as an ordinary developer from my company, more observer than participant. It was fall, the hall was full, and I could hardly find a seat in the second row in front of the main stage. The next speaker is Ethan Price, CTO of Innovate Solutions, the moderator announced. A tall man with a confident gait and a bright smile took the stage. His talk on the future of cloud technology had the entire room listening with bated breath. He spoke so passionately, with such fire in his eyes, that I couldn't take my eyes off him. After the presentation, I had the courage to approach him with a question. Laurel Montgomery. I introduced myself, extending my hand. Your idea of dynamic encryption in distributed systems is amazing, but how do you solve the problem of asynchronous access? His blue eyes widened in surprise, and then he laughed, openly, sincerely. For the first time all day, a really interesting question. Why don't we discuss it over coffee? Coffee turned into dinner, dinner into a stroll through the nighttime city. Ethan was brilliant, charismatic, full of energy. Next to him, I felt special, as if his light was falling on me too. You're not like most people in our industry, he told me that night. There's something real about you. Our first 2 years were filled with mutual admiration. We were both working, building careers, sharing ideas. Every night turned into a brainstorming session. I cooked dinner, Ethan opened wine, and we discussed technology trends, new algorithms, system architectures. Imagine, in 5 years we'll be able to buy that lake house, Ethan dreamed one evening, when we were lying on the roof of our first rented house, looking at the stars. You'll run your development department. I'll launch my own product. And we'll get a dog, I added, snuggling against his shoulder. We will. And maybe more than a dog. He smiled meaningfully, and I felt my heart skip a beat at the thought of a baby. After we got married, we moved into the big apartment Ethan had chosen, an investment in our future. I wasn't sure we needed that much space and such an expensive mortgage, but he insisted and I agreed. At the time, I still thought his financial decisions were wise. The turning point came 2 years after we were married. Ethan came home earlier than usual, his face tense, his gaze detached. I left Innovate, he said, pouring himself a whiskey. Or rather, I was asked to leave. What happened? I was shocked. Corporate policy, he waved his hand. The new director brought his team. Classic story. I hugged him, confident that with his experience and connections, he would quickly find a new position. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Ethan sent out resumes, went on interviews, but always found a reason why this or that company wasn't a good fit for him. Next has a toxic corporate culture, he would explain after another unaccepted offer. I could see it in the eyes of their HR director. TechForce has a too conservative approach to innovation. J Systems requires too much time in the office, and I believe in remote work. Gradually, his denials turned into philosophical musings that he was too creative for the corporate world, and that he must find his true purpose. Meanwhile, the bills kept coming. Ethan, maybe we should temporarily accept any offer while you search for the perfect one, I cautiously suggested, after 6 months of his unemployment. You don't understand, he retorted. If I accept a position below my level, it will be a step backwards in my career. By then, our savings were almost out, and I had made all the financial commitments. My salary as a senior developer at Evertech barely covered my mortgage, insurance, utilities, and groceries. The lake house was out of the question. Sometimes I noticed a change in Ethan. He became irritable, critical. What he used to consider my virtues, thoughtfulness, thoroughness, attention to detail, he now called indecisiveness and lack of ambition. If you'd been bolder, you'd have become CTO a long time ago, he said over dinner, which I prepared after a 10-hour workday. Look at me, I'm not afraid to take risks. I didn't remind him that his risk was paid for by my steady job. It was during those days that I came up with an idea for a new method of quantum data encryption. I started working on it on nights and weekends when Ethan was busy with his networking meetings with friends. It was my way of keeping myself, my passion for technology, which our relationship was slowly sucking away. Why do you want to do this? Ethan asked, catching me working at 3 in the morning one day. Your company won't let you develop this idea anyway. It's for me, I answered, just because I'm interested. Honey, he smiled indulgently. If this idea was really worthwhile, someone would have realized it by now. Better concentrate on helping me with my business plan. At the time, only my friend Zoya remained a breath of fresh air. We met once a week for lunch, and I could feel myself slowly drifting away from my other friends. I just didn't have the energy for a social life after working and taking care of the house. Laurel, Zoya said one day, when I canceled yet another meeting because Ethan was not feeling well and demanding my attention. Do you notice what's going on? What do you mean? Your husband hasn't worked in 2 years, criticizes you, demands your attention and money, yet doesn't appreciate you. It's a toxic relationship, honey. You don't understand, I automatically responded with a phrase I'd often heard Ethan use. He's going through a rough patch. Which is 2 years? Zoya shook her head. I've been a psychologist long enough to recognize gaslighting. It makes you doubt your abilities, isolates you from your friends, controls your finances. We're just going through a tough time. I defended myself, even though somewhere deep inside I knew she was right. And then the thing I feared most happened. Evertech announced massive layoffs, and my name was on the list. My supervisor was furious. I'd been downsized at the behest of the top, despite all my accomplishments. It's politics, Laurel, he explained. They cut everyone who works on non-core projects. I'll give you a glowing recommendation. I came home in a daze. Ethan was sitting on the couch, looking at something on his tablet. I took a deep breath and said, I've been downsized. He looked up, and something like satisfaction flashed in his eyes for a moment, before he put on a mask of sympathy. Well, that's to be expected, he said after a pause. I've always said you've been in one place too long. In this industry, you have to move. I was downsized because of the reorganization, I tried to explain. Sure, that's what everyone says, he shrugged, but it's always the weakest that get cut. If I were you, I'd think about why you were on this list, and not on the list of those who'd been promoted. His words hurt more than the layoff itself. He didn't even ask how I was feeling, didn't give me a hug, didn't tell me everything was going to be okay. Instead, he continued, Do you see now why I didn't want to go back to the corporate world? It's ruthless to the mediocre. At that moment, something in me broke completely. Or maybe it was the other way around. The disparate pieces of understanding finally came together into a clear picture of what my marriage had become. My new daily routine consisted of endless resume mailings, interview preparations, and the constant feeling that I owed something. To Ethan, to prove that I wasn't useless. To myself, to prove that I still had my skills. To the bank, to make another mortgage payment. Every morning, I woke up at 6 o'clock, like I still went to work. I made breakfast, which Ethan rarely ate, because he usually slept until 10. Then, I sat down at the computer and methodically looked at job openings, sent applications, and signed up for interviews. Are you wearing the same t-shirt again? Ethan would show up in the kitchen around noon, with a cup of coffee I'd made. Laurel, do you realize that appearance affects self-esteem? In your situation, I would at least try to look successful. I didn't say anything. It's become my survival strategy lately, Don't answer, don't argue, just nod and keep doing my thing. My psychological shell grew thicker with each such comment. Do you have a job interview today? He asked, looking at something on his phone. Yes, at 1 o'clock, at NextGen. NextGen? He raised an eyebrow. Really? They're on the verge of bankruptcy. Can't you find something better? It's a lead developer position with good prospects. With good prospects of being fired in 6 months. He grinned. Okay, you know what I mean. Don't forget dinner with Brendan and Caitlin. 7 o'clock at the Azure. Azure was one of the most expensive restaurants in town. Not the place to go when one spouse was unemployed and the other hadn't worked in 2 years. But Ethan insisted that connections are more important than money. His connections, my money. The interview at NextGen went well, but they told me right away that they wouldn't make a decision until 2 weeks later. I left their office with mixed feelings. On the one hand, I'd passed the technical interview brilliantly, but on the other hand, Ethan's words about the company's instability made me uneasy. I went to a small cafe called Beans and Bites nearby, a favorite place for programmers from the neighborhood. I ordered a latte and opened my laptop to check my email and send a few more resumes. Among the dozens of auto-response emails to my applications, one with a securefuture.com address stood out. My heart beat faster when I opened it. Dear Miss Price, we are pleased to inform you that all legal formalities for the purchase of your patented quantum encryption system have been completed. The full amount of $12 million will be transferred to your designated account within 3 business days. We would also like to remind you of your right to consulting services for our company, which can be contracted separately if you are interested. Sincerely, Michael Chen, Director of Acquisitions at Securus Future. I reread the letter 3 times before I realized I was paying. Quietly, unnoticed by the other cafe patrons. These weren't tears of joy at the impending riches. They were tears of relief, confirmation that I hadn't been wrong about myself all these years. That my work, which Ethan had ridiculed, was indeed valuable. That I was, contrary to his opinion, not mediocre. That evening, I wore the black dress I'd bought before I was married. Ethan cringed when he saw me. Really? That dress is 5 years old. At Azura gathers a certain circle of people. You could not choose something newer? I think it's appropriate, I said quietly, looking at myself in the mirror. The dress fit perfectly, emphasizing the waist I'd regained when the stress of the last few weeks had robbed me of my appetite. Of course, he rolled his eyes. You're the style expert. That's why you wear stretchy t-shirts all day. Brendan, Ethan's old college friend, now a venture capitalist, and his wife Caitlin, a model turned interior designer, were waiting for us at the restaurant. The flawless couple from the cover of the magazine. Ethan immediately perked up when he saw them, transforming into the charismatic man I'd once fallen in love with. Brendan! What's up, buddy? He hugged his friend, then kissed Caitlin's hand gallantly. You look stunning as always. Ethan, Laurel, good to see you, Brendan smiled. How are you? Never better, Ethan replied, and I felt my shoulders tense. I have a few promising projects in the pipeline. And Laurel, well, Laurel's on a creative kick right now. Oh, you've changed careers? Caitlin asked with interest. No, She was downsized, Ethan interrupted, with fake sympathy in his voice. It's a sad story of corporate America, but maybe it's for the best. You know, it's always been too conservative for the IT industry. I felt the color flood my face. Brendan nodded politely, clearly feeling the awkwardness of the situation. Actually, I had an interview at NextGen today, I said, trying to sound confident. In NextGen? Brendan perked up. It's a great company. I hear they're putting together a new round of funding. Should be interesting. If you're interested in NextGen, I can put you in touch with their CTO, Caitlin suggested. We worked together on a charity project last year. Oh, don't waste your connections on that, Ethan interjected. Laurel has always been a team player, not a leader. She's happily in the middle ranks. Caitlin looked at him in surprise, then at me, but remained silent. Ethan, however, continued. But I'm working on a platform that will change the freelancing market. Imagine artificial intelligence selecting the ideal customer executor pairs based not only on skills, but also on psychological compatibility. That sounds interesting, Brendan replied politely. At what stage of the project? Conceptual? Ethan smiled broadly. I'm putting together a team of like-minded people, people with a vision. The whole dinner went on in the same spirit. Ethan shined, talking about his ideas, occasionally inserting comments about my down-to-earthness and lack of ambition. I silently ate my $80 steak and counted the minutes until the end of the show. As we were saying goodbye in the parking lot, Caitlin suddenly took my hand. Laurel, here's my card. Call me if you want to talk. About anything. In her gaze, I read understanding and sympathy, which somehow made it hurt even more. In the car on the way home, Ethan was unusually silent. I didn't try to start a conversation either, mentally already making a plan of action. $12 million, freedom, a new life. I want a divorce, Ethan said suddenly as we pulled into the driveway. I looked at him, not believing my ears. Not because I wanted to save the marriage, but because he'd beaten me to it. What? You heard me. He stopped the car in our spot in the underground garage. It's not working, Laurel. I need a partner on my level, someone who shares my ambition, my vision. Not a mediocrity like you who's afraid to take risks and settle for less. He expected tears, tantrums, pleas to give our marriage another chance. But instead, I felt a heavy weight fall from my shoulders. Okay, I said calmly. What? Now he looked confused. I said, okay, I agree to the divorce. Just like that? Without a fight? He stared at me incredulously. And you want me to fight for a relationship where you call me mediocre? I held his gaze. No, Ethan, I won't fight for the right to be humiliated. I don't. That's not what I meant. He started to back away, clearly confused by my reaction. I just thought we could discuss. There's nothing to discuss. I opened the car door. You're right. We both need to move on. The next morning, while Ethan was still asleep, I called Zoya and asked for the number of a good divorce lawyer. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the office of Rachel Goldstein, an elegant woman with piercing eyes and a reputation as a ruthless negotiator. So, Mrs. Price, tell me about your situation, she suggested as we settled into her office overlooking downtown. I took a deep breath and began to speak. About how I met Ethan, how our marriage had slowly turned into a toxic relationship, about his unemployment and my support, about his neglect and gaslighting, and finally, about my patent and the $12 million about to be deposited into my personal account. And most importantly, I looked her straight in the eye. I don't want him to know about the money until the divorce is finalized. Is that possible? Rachel tapped her pen on the table thoughtfully. Our state has an equitable division of property law. That usually means that assets acquired during the marriage are divided equally. However, she held up a finger, there are a few nuances that may work in your favor. The divorce process was more agonizing than I expected, but not because of emotional attachment. My love for Ethan had long since turned to ash. The hard part was the legal part and the need to constantly control my emotions. $20,000 in a joint account? That's it? Ethan stared at the bank statement with undisguised disbelief. We were sitting in the meeting room of the law firm representing him. Next to me was Rachel, unfazed and collected. Did you really think we had more? I raised an eyebrow. With your unemployment and my mortgage? But we've always lived, well off. He looked at his lawyer, a middle-aged man with a smug smile that faded at the sight of the financials. On my salary, I reminded him. And we don't have any significant assets other than the apartment, which we'll have to sell to pay off the mortgage. Rachel had helped me structure our finances so that the patent money would be all mine. First, I developed the encryption system in my spare time. Second, the formal purchase offer came after Ethan and I had begun the divorce process. Third, the patent was in my maiden name. I want half of all your savings and assets, Ethan said, crossing his arms over his chest. Including your severance pay, which I spent to pay off our joint mortgage while you were looking for a job. I smiled. All the checks and statements are attached to the paperwork. His lawyer whispered something in his ear, and Ethan grimaced. Okay, but I want half the value of the apartment. Fair enough, I agreed. After the mortgage balance, realtor's fees, and taxes, there would be about 30,000 left for the two of us. 15,000 is yours. 15,000? He paled. That's not serious. It's math, Ethan, I shrugged. That's exactly how much we have. Looking at his confused face, I had conflicting feelings. Part of me wanted to tell him about the patent money, just to see his reaction, to imagine his self-confidence being replaced by shock, then greed, and then the realization that he wouldn't get a dime. How he'd be humbly begging for a share or a loan on his next project. But the other part of him realized that revenge was an extension of the bond. It would mean he still had power over my emotions, over my decisions, and I was so tired of being a puppet in his mind. I have nothing to offer you, Ethan, I said quietly. No money, no hate, no love. Just sign the papers and we can both move on. Maybe something in my voice or look convinced him. He signed the divorce agreement 2 weeks later. My move was quiet and quick. I found an apartment in an old restored building on the edge of the business district. Not luxurious, but with character. High ceilings, wood floors, big windows. None of the modern sterility Ethan favored. I bought furniture I really liked. A comfortable green couch, a vintage desk, bookshelves to the ceiling, a bed with a padded headboard, and linens that I'd always wanted, but that Ethan thought were not designer enough. The money from the patent came into my account 3 days after I signed the final divorce papers. $12 million, a sum that changed everything and nothing at the same time. I was still the same Laurel, only now free of toxic relationships and financial constraints. How are you feeling? Zoya asked when we met at my new apartment. She'd brought a plant in a clay pot and a bottle of champagne. It's strange, I admitted, pouring champagne into glasses. Sometimes I wake up in a panic, thinking I'm late making breakfast for Ethan, or that I won't have time to pay the bills. And then I remember that I'm only responsible for myself now. How does that feel? Scary, I smiled. And beautiful. On Zoe's advice, I started seeing a therapist doctor, Lena Shah. She helped me see the patterns of codependency I had created in my relationship with Ethan and begin the healing process. Your self-esteem shouldn't depend on the approval of others, she told me. Especially the approval of people who use criticism as a way of control. Gradually, I rebuilt old friendships that I had lost during my years of marriage. I resumed yoga classes, which I had quit because Ethan thought they were a waste of time. Enrolled in cooking classes, which I had long dreamed of. But the most important decision was to return to programming. Not for the money, I had enough of it now, but for the passion to create something new, to solve complex problems. I set up an office in my apartment and began experimenting with new ideas in the field of cybersecurity. One evening, sitting on my balcony with my laptop and a cup of tea, I thought about how I would manage my millions. I could never work again. I could travel the world, buy a mansion or a yacht, but none of it matched what I really wanted. I remembered my dream from college, to create technology that would truly change the world for the better. My encryption method was just the first step. I envisioned a company that develops security systems for everyday people, not just corporations or governments, democratizing cybersecurity. I spent the next weeks writing a business plan and researching the market, and the more I delved into the details, the clearer I realized that this was exactly what I wanted to do. Not for revenge against Ethan, not to prove my worth, but for myself and my vision for the future. Life moved on. I started meeting friends in cafes and restaurants, and I was no longer afraid to go out in public. It was on one of those days, sitting in Beans and Bites, working on a prototype of the interface for my future system, that I saw him. Ethan entered the cafe with a woman, a stylish blonde in a business suit. They looked like a couple engaged in a serious conversation. He didn't notice me right away, and I had a few seconds to decide. Hide or stay put. I chose to stay. This had been my favorite cafe long before I met Ethan, and I wasn't about to give it up. When he spotted me, he froze for a moment, then said something to his companion and headed toward my table. Laurel. He smiled that fake smile I knew so well. You look good. Thanks, I nodded. How's life? Great. He glanced at my laptop. Did you find a job? Not exactly. I didn't go into details. What about you? Yeah, at Tech Force. He straightened up, clearly proud of himself. Junior product manager. Not what I was aiming for, but not bad for a start. Hey, congratulations. I was actually glad he'd finally found a job. Not out of affection, but because it meant he could no longer blame me for his failures. Look. He lowered his voice, leaning closer. I realize we've had our share of bad experiences, but if you need help finding a job, or maybe a recommendation, I can handle it. I interrupted him gently. But thanks for the offer. Are you sure? He glanced at my clothes, simple but quality, and frowned. No offense, but in our field, connections are very important. And you've always been a little… Ethan? I smiled, feeling my heart beating steady and calm. You have a companion waiting for you. It was nice to meet you. He blinked, clearly not expecting such a calm rebuff, then nodded and walked back to his table. I gave him a look and went back to work, feeling strangely peaceful. He still thought of me as the same insecure woman who could be manipulated. But that was his delusion now, not my reality. That night, lying in my new bed, I made a final decision. I would name my company Quantum Shield. I will invest $5 million of my own money. I will assemble a team of talented developers and designers who share my vision, and create a product that gives ordinary people control over their digital security, not to prove anything to Ethan or the world, but because this was my passion, my calling, because I finally realized the most important voice to believe in is my own. A year and a half flew by like a day. Quantum Shield went from an idea to a real company with an office in a technology park, 20 employees, and a growing customer base. Our first product, an application for protecting the personal data of ordinary users, was recognized by both professionals and ordinary people. Security should be available to everyone. This motto adorned our office wall and was my personal credo. Today, I was standing backstage at the annual Tech Forward conference, the very same conference where I first saw Ethan. Fate loves irony. I was now one of the keynote speakers invited to talk about the democratization of cybersecurity. My hands trembled slightly as I went through the presentation slides one last time. 5 minutes to go, Ms. Montgomery, the assistant announced, using my maiden name, which I had reverted to after my divorce. I took a deep breath, remembering how Dr. Shah had taught me to deal with anxiety. It wasn't fear, but exhilarating anticipation. When I was announced, I walked onto the stage to a round of applause. The bright spotlight blinded me for a moment, but when my eyes got used to it, I saw hundreds of faces in the audience, and among them, a familiar face in the fifth row. Ethan. He was wearing a suit with the Tech Force logo on his badge. Our gazes met for a second, and I noticed the surprise in his eyes. The presentation went perfectly. I talked about the importance of protecting personal data, how the traditional cybersecurity industry ignores the needs of ordinary users, and Quantum Shield's mission to make effective protection available to everyone. Talked about the technology behind our products, avoiding overly technical details, but providing enough information for professionals to appreciate the depth of our developments. Freedom in the digital age starts with control over your own data, I concluded. Thank you for your attention. The room erupted in applause. I spent the next half an hour answering questions, and then went down to the networking area, where potential partners and investors were waiting for me. I noticed Ethan standing off to the side, watching me. He looked unsure, as if deciding whether to approach me or not. The question was settled when Alex, a tall man with kind eyes and a calm smile, approached me. We'd met 6 months ago at a fundraiser to support technology education programs for girls. He was a professor of computer science and a consultant on the ethics of artificial intelligence. Alex handed me a glass of water and stood next to me, not trying to hijack the attention from those who were discussing the technical aspects of my presentation with me. When the crowd around us thinned, Ethan decided to approach. "Laurel, amazing performance." He began with the same charming smile I'd once loved so much. "I always knew you had great potential." I thanked him with a reserved smile, noting the irony of the situation. "This is Alex Chen." I introduced my companion. "Alex, this is Ethan Price. We know each other from our previous work." I didn't specify that he was my ex-husband. It was a part of my life, which I preferred not to advertise in professional circles. The men exchanged handshakes, looking at each other appraisingly. Alex, knowing the whole story, was polite but reserved. "Can I talk to you in private?" Ethan asked, glancing at Alex. "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Alex," I answered calmly. Ethan hesitated for a second, then nodded. "I saw the article about you in Tech Insider, about the patent, about the 12 million, about Quantum Shield. Why didn't you say anything? During the divorce?" There was resentment and bewilderment in his voice. "What would it have changed?" I asked. "Didn't you support my work on this system? Didn't you call it a waste of time?" "I was wrong." He lowered his voice, casting another glance at Alex, who had tactfully taken a couple steps away, giving us the illusion of privacy. "Look, Laurel, I've been thinking a lot about us, about how things ended. I made a lot of mistakes. Maybe we could have—" "No." I shook my head, not harshly, but firmly. "Ethan, I'm grateful to you." "Grateful?" He looked confused. "Your neglect taught me to appreciate myself. Your critical comments have made me find my inner strength." "Thank you. But I'm no longer the woman who endured humiliation for the sake of a relationship." His face changed, becoming harder. "It's about the money, isn't it? You're rich now, and you think you're better than everyone else?" I sighed, feeling neither anger nor resentment, just tiredness from the old record he was putting on again. "No, Ethan, this isn't about the money. It's about me, about who I've become, about me no longer defining my worth through your opinion." He was about to object, but he was interrupted by the conference coordinator coming up to us. "Ms. Montgomery, sorry to intrude, but your next interview is in 5 minutes." "Thank you, I'll be on time." I smiled, then turned to Ethan. "I have to go now. Good luck at Tech Force." I turned and walked away without looking back, feeling strangely peaceful. There was no gloating or vindictive satisfaction, just the quiet joy of realizing how far I'd come from the insecure woman who was afraid to contradict her husband. Alex joined me as we walked toward the press area. "Are you okay?" he asked, not trying to hug me or protect me. He knew I didn't need it. "More than okay," I smiled. It was final. Our relationship with Alex had developed slowly and organically. No obsession, no codependency. Two adults who enjoyed each other's company, respected boundaries, and shared values. He never tried to remake me or belittle me. On the contrary, he valued my independence as much as I valued his. The patent money gave me not happiness per se, but the freedom to choose my path. Freedom to create a company based on my values. Freedom to work with people who shared my vision. Freedom to build relationships based on mutual respect, not financial dependence. In the evening, after the conference closed, the annual Innovation of the Year award ceremony was held. Quantum Shield was among the nominees, but I didn't pay much attention to it. The recognition itself was already a victory for our young company. When the presenter announced, "The Cybersecurity Innovation of the Year award goes to Laurel Montgomery and Quantum Shield for their revolutionary approach to protecting personal data," I froze in my chair for a moment. Alex squeezed my hand gently. The team at our table broke into applause. I walked up to the stage, feeling a slight unreality of what was happening. Accepting the crystal statuette, I looked around the room. I saw my coworkers cheering and applauding. Zoya, who had specially flown in to support me. And somewhere in the back of the room, Ethan, with a lost expression on his face, as if he couldn't believe that in front of all these people stood the very woman he thought wasn't ambitious enough. This award belongs not only to me, but to the entire amazing team at Quantum Shield, I said into the microphone. We believe that technology should serve people, not corporations. That safety is a right, not a privilege. I paused, feeling emotions overwhelm me, but not from triumph over my ex-husband, but from pride in the path I had traveled. But most of all, I want to thank myself, I continued quietly, for not giving up on my dream, for believing in myself when no one else did. Sometimes the most important voice to hear is your own. Thank you. When I returned to the table, Alex greeted me with genuine pride in his eyes. Not that possessive pride that says, "Look what my woman has done," but genuine joy for my success. And in that moment, I realized that true value isn't in a bank account, industry recognition, or even a successful company. It's in the ability to stay true to yourself, the courage to follow your path, and the wisdom to surround yourself with people who see your light instead of trying to outshine it.
Любі глядачі, дякую вам за перегляд, ставте лайки та підписуйтесь на канал. Також напишіть в коментарях, чи погоджуєтесь ви з Дженніфер, чи вона мала розказати все матері, чи ні, чи мала все розказати своєму коханцю щодо свого чоловіка, чи ні. І також прокоментуйте, чи вам сподобалось це відео.